We have a reservation for one at 2 p.m. on Friday, and it belongs to senior producer from NFL Films, Greg Cosell, who joins us now to talk receivers. And maybe half of this group will not be hearing their name called until day 2. We'll get into that in just a second. But, Greg, good to have you. You ready to roll here?
Well, yeah, they told me Manny was on, so I decided to wear a collared shirt, you know.
Oh,
yeah, looking good.
There you go. Let's begin with guys that we're kind of expecting to go a little bit earlier. I know we've talked to you in the past about Jordan Addison, the Pitt player who transfers to USC. And, oh, by the way, makes like $1.2 million in name, image, and likeness money while he's out there in California. Good move there business-wise.
Crazy.
But here's the prevailing question that I hear more than anything, Greg, about all of these receivers that may not be that big in stature. How is this guy going to do against press and the bigger corners in the league? So let's tackle that with Jordan Addison's skill set specifically.
Yeah, and I think generally, though, just as a quick comment, Brownie, I think what the league has evolved into offensively is you see a lot more motion, a lot more formation variation to try to get smaller receivers in terms of weight away from press coverage. But I would say that he did a very good job specifically with Addison defeating press coverage when he did face it. He did it with short area quickness. He did it with burst. He did not allow press to disrupt his route timing. Now, that's college football, of course, in the Pac-12, but that's all we have to go on. So the point is he had a plan. And I think the first thing you have to have is a plan of how you're going to go about beating it, because you can't just line up and say, gee, I'm going to run through it. But a lot of these guys are going to play in different splits. Tighter splits tend to often mitigate against press coverage. Motion gives you free access more often than not. And I think that's what you're seeing in the league as a whole.
He had that incredible year with Pitt, then transferred to USC. Numbers were not the same. Was he used in a different way at USC versus Pitt? And how do you see maybe one of those years teams should pick apart that and try and use that with him in his first year in his NFL career?
Yeah, Manny, I don't think that'll be a big issue. You know, obviously, he was clearly the number one target at Pitt when Kenny Pickett was there, and he won the Biletnikoff Award as the nation's top receiver. The way that the offense was at USC was a little different. They, with a lot more better receivers throughout, so the numbers were not there. But I think you have to look at the player. I mean, and it's interesting what Brownie said, because Addison may not be big, but I think he plays bigger than his size. I think he aggressively attacks the ball in the air. He made tough contested catches that demanded not only concentration, but body control and strong hands. He's really smooth and fluid. While he's not a burner, I think because he knows how to run routes, he can be a vertical dimension. So to me, he can run multiple routes at all 3 levels. You can use him on screens. You can use him on jet reverses. He'll play in the slot as well. So he has inside-outside versatility.
Okay, let's go from one receiver who's diminutive in stature to another. Josh Downs down at North Carolina, who I thought, nobody can catch this guy. Or find, he's like, he'll shake you out of your shoes in a phone booth. Kind of, that's his short area quickness. It's very impressive. But you hear a lot of people say slot only. And again, we're coming back to the size issue. And, I mean, he's maxed out. He's not even 5'9".
No, he's 5'9", 171. And I think that slot only becomes a function of team and scheme. I think if he was on the Chiefs, he wouldn't be slot only because of the way they use their receivers. So I think that becomes team and scheme. But you are 100% right, Brownie. This guy is explosive. He's twitchy. He's sudden in his movement. He's terrific run after catch. He's a great accelerator. He can stop and start instantly. He needs space. And that's the key thing here is You talked about press. You're not going to put him in situations for the most part where he's likely to be pressed. He's not going to be the boundary X, the single receiver to the short side of the field. He's not going to be that guy. That guy often gets pressed. So you want to give him free access. You want to have him catch the ball on the move. So the run after catch traits, which are really high level, can be utilized. I mean, this guy goes from 0 to 60 in a heartbeat. He's really good in the open field. So you want to give him space. That's how you want to utilize him in the context of your offense.
And then a guy like Jalin Hyatt, he's 6 feet tall, 176. He was a first-team All-American last season, really lit it up for Tennessee last year is when he put his best tape together, went off against Alabama in that Alabama game. He was incredible, had several touchdowns in that game. But you look at a player like him, and you see what he did at Tennessee, and it was like he had a few routes that were his go-to routes. How does that translate in the NFL?
Yeah, Maddie, that's a great question because that question is being talked about with Hendon Hooker as well, because that was almost a pure air raid offense, which was that no huddle, fast tempo, those really wide splits. Very often you saw on each side of the formation, 2 wide receivers outside the numbers. So those with that kind of formation, you're not pressed. So he had free access. He is clearly explosive vertically. He's got accelerating deep speed, and he's got such a gliding feel to his movement. So I know that he only ran a 4.4 at the combine, where people were talking about him running a 4.3. Not that 4.4 is slow, but there's no question on tape he plays fast vertically, and that's. Every team wants that kind of speed because it changes how defenses play. Now, there are certain things you did not see on tape due to the nature of that offense. And then you start getting into the projection part. He did not face press coverage. He did not really run after catch, because when he caught the ball, run after catch to me is not catching the ball when you're wide open and there's no one in front of you. Run after catch is when you actually have to, break down and beat people, whether through shiftiness, elusiveness, or competitiveness or toughness. He would catch the ball, there'd be nobody there, and he would just run. So that to me is not run after catch, but pure speed, explosive vertical ability, that's what he has.
All right, so moving along to another guy, diminutive in stature. Tyler Scott at Cincinnati, largely seen as a day 2 prospect. The guy is fast. He ran AAU track as a high school kid. So what can we say about him, and where does his size factor into his game, either as a positive or a negative?
Well, he's 177 pounds. And again, he's another guy whose vertical speed and explosiveness shows up on tape, and that's where you start. But I thought there was a little more to this kid. I thought that this kid had a sense of how to run some routes. I thought he worked the middle of the field. I thought he tracked the ball really well. Again, he fits today's NFL. You have the tunnel screen, the bubble screens, the jet sweeps. Obviously he's thin framed like the other guys as well. Yeah, and that's what you get with these guys. But you're talking speed and vertical ability. I really liked his tape. Now, he lined up pretty much outside the numbers on almost every play. So now, obviously, you're going to have to teach him different splits, different places to line up within your formation. But that's somewhat common with college, where a lot of guys do not move around. A lot of receivers line up in one place pretty much consistently.
And I know he had success, as a return man as well. What did you watch any of return tape, or you just watch receiver tape?
No,
Greg?
I just watched his receiver tape.
Okay, fair enough.
So then there's Marvin Mims Jr. out of Oklahoma, and he's got more average size, 5'11", 183. But the thing about him, what stands out, is his ability to make and create explosive plays, because he ran a 4.38. This guy is fast on tape. What's his potential in the NFL?
Yeah, I think he's essentially similar. He's a smooth, fluid, vertical receiver. You want to get him the ball on the move, so you want movement routes like go routes, seam routes, crossers, overs. That's what Marvin Mims is. He can line up outside. He can line up in the slot. I think he's mentally tough. I think he's competitive. I think he worked the middle of the field really well. He did that much more in 2020 and 2021 than he did in 2022, where they had a different offense. But he probably lacks the physical frame to work consistently between the numbers and inside the hashes. Another guy that's probably more of a space receiver. He's probably a slot or a Z, meaning off the ball, get him in motion, get him free access, maximize his accelerating speed. What the question becomes 2-3 years down the road, can he be more than that? We'll see. You don't really know the answer to that. One of the things that was really interesting this year watching his tape is he caught a lot of long touchdowns that came on busts by the defense. So he was just running totally free.
Right. And that's another guy that offers some return experience. He did some punt return at Oklahoma as well. Jayden Reed, a little bit bulkier. I mean, it's crazy that we're saying 187 is one of the bigger guys of the guys we've talked about here, but there he is. Jayden Reed, almost 5'11", 187, transferred from Central Michigan or Western Michigan to Michigan State, and had a big 2021 season. Didn't quite match it last year due to an injury and some other things. But what can you say about this guy, and how might he be different, if at all, from some of the others?
I guess, Brown, he better go on a diet to get down to like 180 and 175, huh?
Yeah, right.
I think that the thing that he brings that I think's really good is run after catch. Because this guy's naturally quick. That shows up both as a route runner and run after catch. And that, I think, is where, you really see what he is. He's very elusive in space. He's got make you miss ability. He had a terrific year in 2021. 2022 is, when a guy has a lesser year, it's not necessarily a function. He didn't lose his traits. Their offense as a whole was just not as good in 2022 as it was in 2021. The questions you might have about him is, can he catch through contact? Still, he's still 187. That's not 200. So, but he certainly can run by people at times. He did that in college. So we'll see, but he's another guy that has return ability, but he does have good play speed. I think there's a vertical dimension to his game. He did run away from college corners. So, everybody we're talking about, as you said, guys who are lighter, quicker, faster, vertical ability. There's always a place for vertical receivers, as you guys know, in the NFL.
Greg, we've talked about all these receivers, a lot of them being more day two picks rather than day one picks. Do you believe that there could be some depth there for the Bills to go after at day one if they choose to go after a wide receiver? Do you think that depth really lives in the second round there?
Well, I think, Maddie, that this year, I would say based on tape study and also based on conversations I've had with some wide receivers coaches in the league, I don't think they view any receiver this year as being that true alpha dog in the sense of, a Jamar Chase. So now it gets in the eye of the beholder. Probably the guy that's really fascinating is the first on this list that people are seeing, Jackson Smith-Njigba, who did not really play much in 2022, but in 2021, 104 of his 113 targets came out of the slot. But he's almost 6'1" and 196, so he's not a small little slot receiver. And I'm not going to make an apples-to-apples comparison to Justin Jefferson, but that's what people talked about when Justin Jefferson came out of LSU. He had something like 98% of his targets in his last year in college came out of the slot. And obviously we know he's done a little bit better in the NFL and lines up all over. And I think Smith-Njigba at almost 6'1" and almost 200 pounds does not have to be a slot-only receiver in the NFL.
And then, Greg, with all of these smaller in stature receivers, is this just the beginning of a wave of what we're going to see in the coming years, or would you call this year an anomaly because there are no alpha dogs? It just seems like there's an inordinate number of Smurf receivers this year.
Yeah, I don't think we know the answer to that, but I think that, as I mentioned earlier, Brownie, because of the way NFL offense has sort of evolved, I mean, look at Jalen Waddle in Miami. You guys are very familiar with him, obviously. I think the way offense has evolved with more formation variation, more motion, guys lining up in different spots, including the backfield. I think the idea, look, everybody wants big and fast, but there's not, you don't always get big and fast, Brownie. Everybody wants a lot of things. It doesn't always work in terms of traits and attributes. So I think smaller receivers, there's an absolute place for them, and it becomes a function of the team and the scheme. And you're seeing more and more teams have to do these kinds of things schematically because you have to play with who's available, and not every 6'1", 6'2", 6'3" receiver is as good a prospect as some smaller receivers.
You talked about the fact that there aren't really any alpha dogs, at least in the wide receiver class in this draft class, and we've heard that a lot too. Where the Bills sit at number 27, do you believe there's a value position there that the Bills could go after at 27 that might still be available?
Well, Maddie, I think there's always someone to take that you're going to feel good about, and I think this year more than ever, it's going to be eye of the beholder. I think this is the year, Maddie, where a team could have a player 15th on their board and another team could have the same player 45th on their board. I think that's the way this draft is. So in terms of, obviously the Bills are going to have their list of players that they would love to take at 27. Sometimes you get to 27 and all those players are gone. Sometimes you get to 27 and one or two of those players are still there. You don't know that till it plays out. You try to figure that out in advance, and you try to have a strategy. Hey, if all the guys we want are gone, do we think of trading out? Because ultimately, sometimes I feel like with each passing year, and I could be dead wrong, that, everybody talks about value. This to me is an odd year for value because so many players will be in the eye of the beholder. And the reality is, as we all know, teams always talk about value and best player available, but you've got to fill needs. That's the bottom line. If you don't have players at certain positions, you guys know this. The coaches are limited in what they can do from a schematic and tactical standpoint. So it's always nice to say, let's draft the best player available, but you've got to fill needs. You have to line up with players on Sunday.
Last one I've got for you, Greg. You told us in previous conversations that you're big on Jonathan Mingo. Are there any other guys that have kind of made your eyebrows go up on your forehead in the time that you've watched film at the receiver position? Anybody else that caught your eye? Maybe not to the degree of Mingo, but you say, "Ooh, I kind of like what that guy has to offer." Anywhere in the draft?
Well, this guy I think will be gone before Mingo, but I love Zay Flowers. And again, who knows? Maybe he'll be gone, maybe he won't be gone. But Zay Flowers is a receiver that I really liked on tape. I'm trying to think of some of the other receivers in this draft because I've seen, fortunately, I've seen so many of them that I'm just trying to think of the names. I'm looking. Oh, I'll tell you a receiver I really, really liked. And he's different. Xavier Hutchinson from Iowa State.
Okay.
I really liked his tape a lot. You have to know what he is. I'll give you a great example. If I said to you Keenan Allen, you'd say he's a really good receiver, wouldn't you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, he was a third-round pick. Now, Keenan Allen is a certain kind of receiver. You're not going to compare Keenan Allen to Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase. He's not a burner. He's not a vertical receiver. But he's a really, really good receiver that is really good at what he is. Xavier Hutchinson, to me, is very much like that. He's got good size, about 6'2", 203. Big-time volume target at Iowa State. He's very smooth, catches everything. He was a receiver I really liked.
Okay. And he's expected to go late day 2, early day 3, according to some projections that I've seen. We'll see if he goes higher. Based on that ringing endorsement from Greg Cosell.
Yeah.
We'll see what kind of bump you can give him, Greg.
That doesn't mean he's going to go higher. Believe it or not, once in a while, it doesn't work out the way I see it, Brownie.
Yeah. Well, we're going to see how the Cosell bump works here. Now that we'll stick that on social media and see what happens. See if you can get Hutchinson some love from some other teams in the NFL come draft night on day 2 or 3.
Well, we'll see what happens. Hey, I got one right last year with James Cook for you guys.
There you go.
Yeah.
Listen, Greg, thanks as always. We'll catch up with you next Friday.
All right, guys, appreciate it. Thanks.